What's going on, collective listeners? Welcome back for another episode. Today, we have Tim Lebbossiere, who is the assistant performance coach with the Boston Bruins. Really excited to get this on for all the hockey heads out there. This is an awesome one. He provides a ton of insight. He really gets into kind of start from like a zoomed out perspective of how he views physical preparation for hockey athletes. And then we get into the weeds of how he views data and some of the pieces of technology that they have for on and off ice data collection and how they're implementing it, along with a bunch of other insight that he gets into. And, I won't try to summarize it all now because he really does try to dig into this one. We keep it around an hour. So hopefully you guys enjoy this one. And let's get into it. What's going on, collective listeners? Welcome back to another episode of the Samson Strength Coach Collective. I'm your host, Anthony Grasso. Today we are joined by Tim Lebbossiere, not Tim Lebbossiere or Courvoisier or any of that other stuff. He is the assistant performance coach with the Boston Bruins, obviously in Boston. So welcome, Tim. Super pumped to have you. Obviously, I want to give you a chance to kind of give your own kind of introduction and talk a little bit about what kind of led you down this path, and obviously what's happened obviously prior to leading into being with Boston.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. It's awesome to be here because me and you have so many mutual connections. We've never actually seen each other.
So many.
We've like just missed each other by 6 months or a year or whatever it is, and we've kind of been floating around the same circles. So it's nice to actually be in front of a camera with each other at least. But
if someone asked me if I knew you, I would probably say yes, and then I'd have to realize like, oh well, actually I've never actually met him. I feel like I know you, but I don't.
So the journey's a little bit different than I guess some other people. I grew up not even knowing that strength and conditioning was a thing. I was a competitive gymnast, and anyone who knows that sport at all, strength and conditioning is not a priority in that whatsoever. So I didn't even know strength and conditioning was a thing until my very first strength and conditioning session as a freshman gymnast at Springfield College, and I just so happened to be an exercise science major at probably one of the best strength and conditioning colleges in the country. And it just kind of snowballed from there of like me being in it as an athlete and me being in it as a student as well. Going down that rabbit hole, leading to some internships. I probably did way more than I needed to, but that's all right. I bounced around to Holy Cross, Quinnipiac. I did some stuff with USA Hockey in a private facility in the South Shore of Massachusetts. Went and did my grad school at Lindenwood University out in St. Louis. Left there a year early with a really good opportunity to come back close to home in Boston, work originally with our minor league affiliate in the Providence Bruins. And then this past year was my first season with the Boston Bruins, and now I'm going into my second season with them. So it's been a whirlwind of moving around to a lot of different places, but we're kind of settled now, so it's been good so far.
Who's we? Are you married, or you?
I am not married. No, it's
okay.
Me, my girlfriend, and 2 dogs right now. So we have a little family, but not anything official yet,
Good. That's awesome. That's great to hear. Yeah, it's always great to hear when people are actually able to do what they love around people they love. So obviously being back home is awesome. And it's like, being around Springfield, I guess it's not a terrible place to be lost, right? Like you're not really knowing like, oh, like, is this an actual profession? We can do this as a career. Oh, I just happen to be in one of the best places to do it. That works.
For sure. And then it's like, I just happen to say like, okay, what's the closest Division I college that I can go intern at? Okay, Holy Cross. And it's like, oh, Jeff Oliver's a legend. There you go.
Jeff Oliver.
He leads me to be down at Quinnipiac, and it's just crazy how it all snowballs like that. One little thing that you don't think is going to turn into anything actually ends up setting up a whole career.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, that makes sense. So Jeff. Then you went Jeff, and then you went down to B. Yeah, okay, exactly. Yeah. Because I met when I was interning at Quinnipiac, we went up to Holy Cross and met Jeff. And I remember, I think I've told the story before, but I was up there. I was just some lowly intern, and he was like pulling me aside, asking me like all these questions about things that he wanted to know from me and my insights. I'm like, dude, I don't know anything. You know what I mean? Like, you're Ollie. You know what I mean?
I give Jeff so much credit because he was my first internship ever, and I knew absolutely nothing. And if you talk to him, he might sugarcoat it and say that I was like, okay, but I knew legitimately nothing. And he randomly at the kind of midway point of my internship, I'm coaching with the football team with him, and I was still at that point a little bit lost. And he said to me like, hey man, like, I don't know if you don't know a lick about anything, but like, you can coach. Like, I just had this knack of like being able to see how people could move and at least like coach them through some sort of movement. And I didn't necessarily realize that at the time. I just felt lost, and he kind of pulled me aside and told me like he saw something in me. So I think I probably would have kept going at it no matter what. But he for sure sparked some interest in me even more.
Yeah, yeah. There's something so crazy about that particular. I hate when people use like the like family or like that tree or that like whatever like community, but there is kind of a community. Like everybody that I've met who knows B, I'm like, oh, like it was such a refreshing like viewpoint, right? To be able to come back from some of the experiences that I had, and everybody has these experiences, strength and conditioning, where they're just like, oh wow, this is it's very closed off, narrow-minded, perception or whatever the case may be, and it can deter a lot of people. I think it kind of like puts people in a position where they're like, oh man, I don't really know, like, is this for me or not? And then some people thrive in it because some people love that narrow-mindedness, right? And I think obviously, like, it's not everywhere, and I would say it's probably getting a little bit better. But I remember when I went to Quinnipiac, I was like, oh wow, like this is fun again. Like coaching is fun again. Being around these people are fun again. And everybody I met who knew B and everybody who come through Quinnipiac, I would just be like, oh wow, like these are actually nice people. So like, I guess nice people work in this profession too. Like if it does have it, like that's pretty cool. And then you go to Holy Cross and you feel like, oh, okay, like this could work out. Yeah, for sure. So and when you were interning at Quinnipiac, were you commuting down from Mass or were you?
Yeah, so I was in my senior year at Springfield. So I was lucky enough where we practiced 6 days a week for gymnastics, and I was lucky enough from my head coach to get the option to go down there twice a day and miss practice, or sorry, twice a week and miss practice. So I was there for a full day on Tuesday and Thursday, but I was still commuting, waking up at 4 a.m. to leave for 4:30 to get there at 5:30 for the 6 a.m. session. And then on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I was commuting back at 2 o'clock, hopefully not hitting any traffic to make it back for a 3 o'clock practice. So it was crazy for about 6 months there.
How far of a drive was that?
It's like 50 minutes without traffic, but
yeah, but you got to take the Merritt Parkway, don't you?
Yeah, and all you need is one accident and you're screwed,
Dude, all you need is on the Merritt Parkway, Connecticut. All you need is someone to just tap the brakes slightly, and then you're looking at a good 4 to 5 miles of delays. Exactly. I mean, it's unbelievable, especially now, dude. I don't know last time you've been in Connecticut, but ever since COVID and everybody's moved into Southern Connecticut from the city, if you go down into Fairfield County, it's ridiculous. I mean, you're just tapping brakes the whole time.
I don't ever dream to drive on the Merritt Parkway again, so I've avoided Southern Connecticut at all costs.
Yeah, they need to just get rid of the Merritt Parkway in total. But so B knew that this was kind of what you were doing too. I'm sure he dug deep and was like, wow, this dude's driving down here, twice a week or whatever at 4 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out a way to get here for the 6 a.m. lifts.
Yeah. So he I think saw commitment out of that, and I think just from me being at Holy Cross and then being at Springfield, he at least knew I wasn't incompetent and I was willing to work hard, and that was enough for him. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I feel like B is one of those guys like, hey, listen, if you just show up, like, and actually like bring some sort of enthusiasm, like obviously you have to have a desire to be here, but if he's like, you just show up, like I'll take care of you. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna push you in the right direction. Yeah,
and I always liked how he did things too, because it wasn't like, hey, here's the internship curriculum. Because me walking in, say if I did that internship 2 years later, I'm at a completely different spot. So there were some times that people were going there for their grad school internships. It was my undergrad internship. So everyone could be coming in a different spot, and he tailors what he would teach to people depending on where their baseline is. So I think he does it a really good way.
He really does. And that was exactly how he presented it to me. He was like, hey, listen, you're going to get the most out of this by essentially like what you want to get out of it. So like come in, all these books, they're yours, you know what I mean? Like whatever you want to take, obviously take. I mean, I can't tell you how many things that he let me photocopy and take all like flash drives and stuff, but and there's been a lot of guys who have done that stuff, but I think it was unique about B was he always knew where you were at in your journey. And so he wasn't peppering you with like random questions each day that were just like completely like from like, he always kind of knew like, okay, and there's a weakness here. I'm going to ask him these questions. He may or may not know the answer, but if he doesn't, then it's going to force him to obviously seek the answers of those things. Maybe he's asking me, maybe he's doing some digging at somewhere else. I remember I used to like, he would ask me a question. I think he asked me a question once about like mobility and like where it comes from or whatever. And I remember like we came to the conclusion, we finally found the answer, whatever, as the day went on. And I ended up like, as I was saying goodbye to him, I kept like repeating the answer over and over again. Like as he's walking out the door, I'm like, all right, Beast, like mobility comes from blah, blah, blah. And he was just like, okay, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
it's cool again.
I'm gonna go have dinner with my family. Leave me alone now.
Yeah. Like leave the weight room today, please. Like at least some point go home. But I think that was the thing, whereas like I think other coaches like they'll try to challenge interns, and I think that's good. Like I do think it's a good thing, but I think there was something so methodical about B. He always knew where you were at. Like he always knew, like, okay, Ant now knows this, great. What's the next weakness? What can I ask him tomorrow? And it obviously always kept you on your toes, and it always, kind of made you feel like, all right, need to continue to stay sharp here each and every day. So I really appreciate B for what he brought there, for sure.
Yeah. Let's not make his head too big though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, hopefully he doesn't listen to this podcast. But yeah, no, for sure. And well, one thing I do have to say, and that he would probably, it would be a problem if I didn't mention it, is he is good at basketball. He shoots really well.
He does. Yeah. I played like a 2-on-2 or 3-on-3 game with him and a couple other people one time, and he was lighting it up. And I haven't played basketball since I was in like 8th grade. So I was absolutely terrible. So it was interesting.
Yeah. We used to play 21 because the only other guy that was there when I was there was Jamie Pasquin. So it was just me and Jamie. And then, sometimes the hockey guys would try to like, pop in or whatever, play some pickup or whatever on the court. But I remember being like, damn, this dude can shoot, man. And I was like, and I can't muscle things. Like I try to muscle through things sometimes. I'm like, this isn't working. You know what I mean? I'm like, it was tough, but yeah, so awesome. So let's get into it. Obviously, you've traveled a pretty decent path, right? Well, how old are you now?
I'm 28. I'm about to turn 29 next week.
Oh, okay. So you're super young, and obviously you're now in a position where you're, I don't want to say this is like the destination, because I always think it's better to travel than to arrive, but you are in a situation right now where you can kind of hang your hat and say, wow, like I've made it to a top level. Obviously I'm working with a professional hockey club. What are some of the things that you feel like have kind of, shaped the rabbit holes that you're going down now, and some of the things that you find very interesting with what you're able to obviously pursue in terms of, the players you're working with now at that level?
Yeah, I think early on when I was kind of leaving Quinnipiac, maybe going to Lindenwood University, I saw that there was a really big hole in my learning and understanding of sports science, and that there was a huge opportunity in a lot of sports, but specifically in hockey, where it's starting to grow, and there were sports science positions starting to pop up, and a lot more even just strength coaches that weren't sports scientists were starting to focus more on that. So at Lindenwood, I try to focus a lot more on, jump testing and different things with the limited resources and budget that we had there. And then I luckily, in between my 2 years of grad school, I did an internship at UMass Lowell with Devin McConnell, where he was the name at the time for hockey sports science, where he was doing a lot of stuff with Gym Aware. He was doing RSI testing to get different buckets for groups of guys and individualizing them. And that was pretty eye-opening in what I was lacking and what I needed to improve on. And luckily that kind of right after that internship was when I started with Providence, our minor league affiliate, where now all of a sudden I have a budget and we have jump mats, which, are inexpensive, but you can do a lot of stuff with them. We have gym wares. We have heart rate system down in our minor league affiliate, all of which besides the jump mat is new to me. So it was interesting to see how that evolution happened. And then now at the NHL level, we are still doing all of those things with the gym aware and the jump mat. But now we have catapult on top of our heart rate system that I'm in charge of. We have had force plates in the past that we have since gotten rid of, but we have a force frame through Vald, where we have a leads react, which is a new I don't even know how to describe it because it's not video. It's all motion censored based timing gates, which is interesting. We are just getting those now, so we haven't experimented too much with them. But we have a lot of technology that we're starting to tinker with and use to really squeak out the extra 1% of our NHL guys, because we're, like you said, at kind of the peak here. A lot of these guys, their skill levels is good enough to get them to the highest levels. So we're trying to, etch out any little bit that we can over the competition.
Yeah, for sure. No, that sounds incredible. And I do have some questions, especially built around some of the GPS systems and how you guys might track data and how it might look different, to obviously like field or court sports. Before we get to that though, I'd love to like kind of just take a sort of like a 50,000 foot overview of how Tim, approach training and physical preparation for a hockey athlete, right? Because I think you might be like, I mean, I've definitely talked to a couple hockey strength coaches on this podcast, but ever since I became the sole host, you might be the first like sole hockey strength and conditioning coach that we've had on here. So I'd really love to kind of provide that insight. And then what we can do is kind of, we talk about some of the things from like a groundwork, like foundational perspective, and then kind of talk about like what you're using data for, from a more of a backdrop perspective to try to provide some guidance around those things.
For sure. I think just to preface anything that I say, I think maybe our situation compared to another situation in the NHL is that we don't have a lot of accountability issues that we have to run with our players. There's really no issues with hard work or anything. We're running with Therese Bergeron as our captain, who's one of the most highly respected players in the NHL. We had Zdeno Chara, who was the captain for 14 years before that. So we've had a core group of leaders that has helped the young guys come in, and we just get to automatically train guys the way we want to, because we don't have to worry about guys not showing up or anything, because that's just the standard that the other players hold each other to. So that itself has been really nice, because I'm not sure other NHL clubs have that same sort of leadership. But
Yeah, that's awesome.
Kind of how we view the program in general. Obviously there's different variations, but we look to improve speed in very many different means, depending on where the individual is at currently. Obviously we want players that are fit and in shape, but everything that we're doing, whether it's a strength, a mobility, a power and speed standpoint, is going towards speed development, because that's the way that the game is going, is that everyone's getting faster. You look at the best player in the world as Connor McDavid. He's the fastest human that anyone's ever seen on ice. So the game for sure is going in that direction. So when we look at our, for example, mobility work, we are diving into specific things like ankle dorsiflexion to improve shin angles. When we're sprinting, we're looking at, stance leg stability so that they can get a stronger push off when they recover after their stride leg. So a lot of our prep work has to do with, specific things that the hockey stride will actually go through. When we think about our strength work, we're always thinking about moving it with intent, but then also getting strength to a certain means, because at a certain point when a player is strong enough, there's no need for them to get any more stronger to improve their speed. It has to go more towards the speed strength and pure speed side of things. Same idea from a power standpoint. We might transition from more heavy ballistic work to light ballistic work, or transition back the other way depending on where a player is. All of that encompassing the fact that we also are sometimes working with 37-year-old players that we need to make sure, they're not trap bar deadlifting 400 pounds anymore. It's just not happening. They probably aren't trap barring at all anymore. So we have a kind of umbrella understanding that no matter what we do, health is the main priority for every single one of these players.
Sure. Yeah. Keep best abilities availability, I think is what they say. Right. So that's awesome. That's really interesting, especially considering, your experience with Devin. Right. So it's kind of like, yeah, you're, kind of like kind of like shaping the framework of how you guys are approaching this a little bit too. When it comes to increasing that ankle dorsiflexion, you're specifically talking about, are you specifically talking about the ankle dorsiflexion that is required for off the ice sprinting, or are you talking about some of it? Because obviously they're wrapped up in that skate, right? Pretty tight. So they're not getting a ton there, right? Is it kind of like a, double-edged sword there? It's like, hey, we just need it because it's something they're not getting when they're in the skate. And also it kind of will help us obviously get a little bit more out of them off the ice when we're trying to expose them to some of those higher speeds.
I think it's twofold in exactly what you're saying. I think depending on how players tie their skates, it's going to be wildly individual based on what they do. But as a general standpoint, if anyone asks our opinion, which they very rarely do about this, and they say, how tight should I tie my skates? How loose should I tie them? Should I do one eyelid untied? We generally say like as loose as possible for you to have stability in the ankle. If you leave 3 eyelids open, your ankle is going to be flopping all over the place and you can't push off. But if you
Sure.
tighten it, all the way up and, have a partner crank on the laces with you, your ankle can't move and you're not going to be able to get in the right position. So we, kind of allow players to play with what they think feels the best for them. But then from the actual off the ice ankle dorsiflexion thing, exactly what you're saying, we're just looking to improve the dorsiflexion so that they can get into better positions off the ice. So then hopefully the off the ice sprinting, being in better positions allows them to move faster, almost as an overload so that they can move faster on the ice.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And kind of building off and just sticking with the theme of sprinting, right? Because now you're at a point where we're talking about obviously trying to expose them to the sprint qualities, which I think are, obviously we can, run down the benefits, and that's probably a whole different podcast, right? But I do think there in some respects, not everybody should be sprinting, even whether you're playing a sport or not. But obviously, when it comes to sprinting, right? And correct me if I'm wrong here, but I remember back when I was looking at hockey, from an off ice sprinting perspective, right? You're like, all right, well, when they're on the ice, it's almost like the opposite in terms of the time motion analysis, ground contact times, right? It's like, I believe on the ice, right, there's, less ground contact time at the start. And then as they obviously increase their stride and they increase their speed, there's more ground contact time, where obviously, off the ice, it would be the opposite, with longer ground contact times to less ground contact times, shorter ground contact times. I might just call them GCTs because it's really it's like a mouthful to try to, but so yeah, is that something that kind of plays a factor, or is it more so like, hey, listen, like they're off the ice, we're going to give them a sprint because we want to expose them to get faster, and then we're hoping that at some point, it transfers over to what takes place on the ice, or do you guys kind of mix and match what goes on there?
We mix and match for sure, but we definitely err towards doing more higher impulse movements because of that exact thing that you're saying, the higher ground contact times. So even from our jumps in our plyometrics, we do probably less double leg and continuous plyometrics just because those have shorter ground contact times, and we err more towards doing single leg just because that ground contact is automatically going to be higher. We do a lot more step up jump variations because that ground contact has to be higher, as well as just typical box jumps and just standing vertical jumps. We do a lot of lateral bounds and lateral hurdle hops because that's the direction of force that happens in the hockey stride as well. So not only do we look at it from a ground contact time, but we look at it from a direction of that ground contact time. And then in our sprinting, we, as a general rule of thumb that I think, probably a lot of people in other sports as well do, we try to move kind of along the force velocity curve as the off season goes along. So we do a lot more strength and higher impulse stuff earlier in the off season, and we transition to a little bit more quicker and speed stuff at the end. So we start a lot of our early off season sprinting in half kneel starts, in hand plank starts. We do a lot more probably sled sprints. All of those because those ground contacts are going to be higher, at least in that first initial push. And we don't tend to ever go over 20 yards. And even those 20-yard sprints that we do, the majority of them are sled pushes. And if we ever go no sled and just body weight on those, it tends to be something transitional. So they'll do a 5-yard shuffle into a 15-yard sprint. So the total distance is 20 yards, just because obviously, as I hope a lot of people know that are listening, the longer distances you go, the ground contact time start decreasing. So we kind of mix and match a little bit, like you're saying, but mainly focus on the ground contacts being in the right realm.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's awesome. And so kind of like you kind of took the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to ask next about that force velocity curve, right? Like how you guys move and support some of the things that, or do some of the things that are going to support speed. So, are you guys throwing med balls? Obviously, you mentioned you're already doing some plyometric work, right? And like, does it vary? I mean, obviously when I was at Quinnipiac, right, we always kind of talked about like giving a little bit of what they're not getting, right? So you're working with a rotational athlete. Like, are we doing rotational throws? Are we kind of letting that take place on the ice, kind of thing? How do you guys handle that stuff?
Yeah, I'd say from everything except from the rotational med ball throw standpoint, we do what they're not getting. I've messed around in the past with doing some non-shooting side med ball stuff, which I know when I was at Quinnipiac, B was doing that. I'm not sure if he still is, but we kind of strayed away from that, because let's just say if you're doing whatever, even 3 sets of 8, non-shooting side, we have David Pasternak who will go out before practice and shoot 100 one-timers. So it's like, what the hell is the point? What are we doing? So we kind of feel like, no matter what we do, it's not going to reach the volume and the velocity that they're doing out there. So that stuff probably doesn't matter. From a hip standpoint, we definitely do a lot of what they don't get. We do a lot of groin squeezes. We do a lot of pure hip extension work, because a lot of the glute stuff that they do tends to be rotational and lateral. So we almost try and reverse that hip joint angle a little bit. And we do a lot of stretching on the posterior capsule and not a lot of stretching on the adductors, because that's what they're already getting on the ice. So that's a lot of what we do from what they're not getting standpoint. I think from the force velocity curve standpoint, kind of as a general rule of thumb, we have everyone start at force and end on velocity, but how far they go down that curve and where they start on that curve is going to be different based on the athlete. We might have a 19-year-old kid who's never played a pro hockey game and he's 160 pounds soaking wet. Like, he's going to start on hypertrophy and then maybe go to strength, and that's it. Versus, a guy who's been in the NHL forever and can, if we wanted him to trap our deadlift 500 pounds, like, he might sprinkle in 2 weeks of strength work at the beginning, kind of start transitioning to power and speed stuff right off the bat. And then we might have, some sort of 2-week strength maintenance phase toward the end of or middle of the summer, just so he's not, missing out on strength work for all those weeks. And then in season, it's pretty wildly different. We kind of have 3 days that we organize our training schedule as. We organize them as a strength day, a power day, and a speed day. So a strength day typically is not actually a strength day. It's probably more of a hypertrophy day if you want to look at it like that. But those typically fall on game days, and we lift after games. So we will pick a lower body exercise, an upper body push, and an upper body pull, and a core. We'll do 2 sets of 8 of all those things and then get out of there. We are running in a 600 square foot gym at our actual rink that we play at. So we want guys in and out of there as quickly as possible. And that's the kind of last resort when we can't train at our practice facility with a practice day because of our schedule. Our power days are probably what we do the most. That is probably your typical contrast day. We might trap our deadlift in kettlebell swing. We might dumbbell bench and med ball chest pass. So we are, hitting a little bit of the speed side of things, but that's where we get our true strength work as well with our lower volume, heavy exercises. And then we have true speed days where we do a lot of 5-yard sprints. We do a lot of, barbell, trap bar, or dumbbell squat jumps. We might do some landmine push presses. So we kind of cycle through those 3 different days to make sure that we're hitting a little bit of everything over the course of a month, because our travel schedule can get crazy. So, at least 2 of those days a month is our priority.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can imagine it's got to be pretty difficult. So are all 3 of those themes being hit after games, or are you just saying like just the strength day?
Just the strength one. We have done a couple of the power days after as like a kind of last option. And it tends to just be like, we'll do maybe kettlebell swings as our lower body power. And then it'll be traditionally just an upper body power day.
Sure.
Just because the stress of the lower body obviously for the games is high. But yeah, those other 2 days, the power days and the speed days, always fall on practice days outside of those really, really rare circumstances.
Okay. And do you guys hit those before practice, you're saying?
Yeah, we like I've said, I think before, like, I don't know how other NHL teams are doing it, but we allow our players to kind of choose whether they want to lift before or after practice. And I'd say we're at a 98% before practice group. And it's typically maybe just a guy who's dealing with a nagging injury or something. He wants to go on the ice before, so that if anything happens on the ice, we can modify after with the lift, versus maybe potentially fatiguing something in our lift and then going on the ice after that. But yeah, all of those are before, which we almost use as like a potentiation effect as well. Hopefully, I don't think they know that. I just think they want to get it over with so that they can get out of the building after practice, but that's how we look at it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And do you get, I mean, what's it like on the road? I mean, if you guys are traveling and I mean, like, are you guys have the resources or whatever, but still get one of those lifts in like after games or before practice kind of thing if you guys are traveling?
Yeah, it depends on where we're at. So the league is really good about they mandate that every rink has to have a specific number of equipment available. So at every NHL rink, there's a barbell with 185 pounds worth of plates. So you could do whatever deadlifts if you really wanted to, but mainly landmine stuff. There's 2 sets of power blocks that go up to 50 pounds. There's med balls. There's ladders and hurdles and foam rollers. Now there's going to be the Anchor systems this coming year onto there, so we can do cable stuff as well. So that at least can cover our ass for the strength style lifts that we do if we're going to do them after the games. But there are some rare times when we're in some of the better NHL cities that have more resources where we can get an actual lift in. But because the schedule is so crazy, we typically have one day in a city before we leave. There's very rare circumstances we're there for 2. So if we are going to lift, we generally give guys like a 3-day window, and it's like, hey, train on any of these 3 days that you want. If we're on a 14-day road trip, which tends to be our longest one, we tend to have like one city where we know that the resources are really good, that everyone has to lift on this day because they have trap bars and med balls and dumbbells that go up to 90 instead of 50. So everyone has to lift on this day. And then in the other cities, just get something in those 3 days. And like I said before, because of our leadership group, we're at 100% success rate of someone coming in on those 3 days.
Yeah, that makes sense. That sounds awesome. And so, I mean, that's what I was going to kind of ask next time. Obviously, what was, obviously this, I mean, I don't know how much of an emphasis on speed everybody else is putting, you know what I mean, on their players, whether it be in the NHL or any other sport at this point, right? So like what, like, and there might be, I don't know, you know what I mean? But was there any like pushback at all, or as far as like some of the new way, or was this stuff already being implemented prior to you getting there? Like what is kind of the feedback from some of the guys? I'm like, oh wow, so it's not the traditional just like go in the weight room lift. It's like there's a major emphasis on everything we're doing is really built around speed, or it supports speed in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think there's been a little bit of pushback, mainly from people who have just never trained that way, so it's different to them. So their body may feel differently than it normally does. And that's also not to say that we are doing so much speed work that we're missing out on a lot of strength work. We have a pitch shark in here that I think we have, eight guys go on game days. So they're pitch sharking, 8, 9, 10 plates on each side. So we still have a huge emphasis on strength for guys that want it as well. But it is for sure different. We've had other guys that, we write a warm up every single day for practice and for pregame skate. We've had some veterans for 10 plus years that have come in from other teams, and they say like, I've never done a dynamic warm up with my strength coach in my life. And that's just like the standard for us. So it is for sure different. We tried to tailor and find a middle ground if someone does complain on what we want and what they want, because ultimately, especially if it's someone who's older, they've been in the league longer than I've likely even known about strength and conditioning. So they know their body and what they feel the best after they do. So, if I think that this guy needs to hit, heavy trap bar, and he says like, no, I think I need to, do some more speed work, or I think my conditioning feels a little bit different, we might still do heavy trap bar, but we might do 2 sets instead of 3 sets, and then we'll do some sprints on the assault bike or something. We are very flexible in what we do, because we know a lot of these guys have been playing for a really long time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the value and just the asking the question, what do you think? What works well for you? Like, how can we kind of find some common ground here? I would imagine has probably been, awesome, getting much more feedback and probably a lot more buy-in from an athlete who's like, hey, dude, I've been doing this for 20 years. And like, I just know like whether or not what I'm doing actually works. I mean, it may work in spite of or because of what I'm doing. You'll probably get more out of them, just them knowing that like, okay, Tim's gonna listen to me and he's gonna have me do what I believe in, right? There's probably a lot of value there.
Yeah, and two, with that, like, if someone does have pushback and we're pretty solid on wanting them to do that, like we explain why we're doing it. We want to make sure that we have a why to every single thing that we're doing. We have a lot of different resources here, from recovery modalities and different technology that we're using, and people ask questions, and if you don't know why you're doing something, like they can sniff out the bullshit really easily, and they're not going to want to do it. So you need to be really sharp on why you're doing something, and be ready to give that answer whenever, because they ask it at the most random time. So that has been helpful in getting buy-in, if we can at least wrap their mind around why they're doing something. And that takes obviously a lot longer for some other people. And, for my head performance coach that I'm here with, Kevin Neild, he was up in Boston for 3 years while I was down in Providence. So this was our first year working together. So if Kevin says something, my first month of working here, people understand that, like, okay, we have 3 years of understanding why he does things, then he knows what he's talking about. But then there's, this new guy that's in the building, let's ask him a couple more questions and sniff out to see if he actually knows what the hell he's talking about. And luckily, I think I've done an okay job about that. But I'm sure there's other opportunities where I haven't done a good job, and I've maybe missed out on an opportunity to get better buy-in from someone who is asking a question.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you're doing an excellent job there, and obviously that's why they put you in that position. But I do think it is important. It's like, we all come across those situations where, like you said, it's like, dang, like that was such a random question to have in that time, and sometimes it's like you want to give them a pretty high quality answer, and it's like, well, what you're asking me isn't that simple. And the better something and the more you understand it, it's like I would love to give them a simple answer, because I think is what a lot of these guys are looking for, right? Like, they don't have time to sit there and go through the weeds with you, but like, so I think it's like tough. Like, you try to find that balance of like, well, I want to give the respect of this topic and the question that you're asking me. I want to give you the right answer. I don't want to give you some like band-aid approach or whatever, because I do, but at the same time, like, I think some of the best coaches, right, they're able to take these really complex things and just kind of give you these like short, quick hitters or whatever, to allow the players to kind of like, okay, yeah, we'll move it. And then, like you said, like they're, the hockey players, like they're going to be able to sniff out the bullshit. And I want to say, out of all the sports that I've worked with, I really do feel like hockey players mostly, because I mean, they're like, I feel like fitness and just training in general is such a part of their culture that they just know, and they've been involved in it since they were younger. And, obviously a lot of these guys have been skating since they like, I don't know, 2-3 years old. Right. So it's like, they just know, and they do, and they really, really care about the physical preparation side of things. And so it's funny. I feel like out of all the athletes, like they're like, they smell blood in the water, man. They're like sharks. Like, let's pounce
I totally
on this
agree with it, man, because they're not shy about letting you know that they smell the bullshit too. They're not going to sugarcoat it. So I've always liked that about it, because it keeps me sharp and on my toes as well. So
yeah, for sure. Well, kind of want to get into now, just kind of talking about, obviously we don't have to go through every single piece of technology that you own, but more so like maybe even just talking in generalities. And then obviously people who are listening to this podcast have questions, and they want to reach out to you or whatever the case may be, we can go that route. I always felt like podcasts would just really kind of like, spark interest as opposed to providing like wholesale answers, right? It should be like give you the ability to go dig and do your own homework kind of thing. But if you kind of want to just talk in general framework, like how do you view the concept of collecting data, right, when it comes to what you're doing with the Bruins? And then I have some questions kind of around Catapult and like, how it may look different from some of the things that you track on the ice versus some of the things that I may have tracked on the field, right, in football, whatever the case may be. So, I think at first, if you want to just kind of go with, what's your perception on like how you view collecting data, right? Like what service does it provide for you?
Yeah, so I'll talk strictly about the off-ice stuff so that we can dive into the on-ice stuff after. But this is actually a perfect topic, because I just gave a presentation on this, and I think the overarching thing that I like to get across to people is that like data isn't technology, because I think people think of data and they just think of like Catapult and force plates and GymAware, and that's not data. It can be a part of data, but data can be as simple as collecting body weights on people, doing wellness questionnaires and session RPs. You can collect a ton of actionable data with literally zero cost to your budget. So I think, like I said, body weights, when we're looking at kind of the gamut of everything, if you're looking at, anthropometrics first, we can do height, weight, body fat. We can do muscle girth. All of those can give you data that you can make actionable changes with. Then when we're looking at it from a mobility standpoint, we do ankle dorsiflexion, we do hip rotation, ERIR, we do shoulder, ERIR, we do T-spine rotation, and then we do shoulder flexion as well. You can do FMS, you can do SFMA, however you get that data. That's another data point to see how someone moves. From a strength standpoint, you can do 1 rep maxes. You can do an open set and, get somewhere in the 1 to 10 range. You can use velocity to find a load that's between 0.3 and 0.5 meters per second. There's a lot of different ways to do strength stuff. From a power standpoint, you can do, watt bike sprints, you can do assault bike sprints, you can do vertical jumps. Obviously, you can do different velocity based power exercises, similar to the strength exercises, just in different velocity ranges. And then from a speed standpoint, you can obviously do, watt bike sprints, assault bike sprints. You can do on ice sprints, off ice sprints. And then a conditioning standpoint, you can do aerobic tests. You can do anaerobic tests, whatever you want to do. But we do the whole gamut of all of those. I can dive into more specifics about what we actually do from a testing protocol, but all of that to say, the data that you're collecting, one, it can be easy regardless of what your budget is, but two, you collecting data doesn't matter if A, you're not going to do anything to change your actual program from that data, and B, if you're not going to retest to see if the changes that you made in your program are actually improving those scores that you picked up. And I think that's a problem that a lot of people have. They want to collect data because they know that it's important. So they do a 1 rep max test, and on testing day, quote unquote, of the first day in the season, we do all this 1 rep max testing, and we run 300-yard shuttles and whatever, because we need to make sure everyone's coming into school or into training camp in shape, and then nobody actually retests that. So it's like, okay, what was the point? I get that you need to make sure that people are coming into school doing the right thing, but like, then how do you know during the year they're doing the right thing if you don't actually retest them? So, or how do you know you're doing the right thing? Someone may need strength and you're doing strength work, and then you retest them 2 months down the line and their strength has gone down. So it's like, okay, you're not doing the right thing. So
Right.
I could go on a rampage about both myself and other coaches doing this incorrectly.
Sure.
But that's how I feel about data as a whole.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's a great take, and I don't think I need to add anything anything more to that. I was gonna say, sometimes you just gotta let the person you're interviewing just speak, and yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there for sure. Yeah, I definitely don't want to get started on how I feel about like when everybody shows up first day of school and it's like, oh yeah, we're just gonna throw all these random tests at you. That's its own separate problem, right? And then it's like, oh no, we're never gonna retest them again. So yeah, there's that too.
For sure.
But yeah, if you want to kind of talk a little bit about some of the stuff, because I would imagine, right, like obviously like Catapult itself, and like I think like Catapult is, I don't know, maybe you have a better idea of this, but like how much influence it's having in the hockey world now, and it's kind of probably making its way in different sports that we never thought it would make its way into. But yeah, I mean, are there certain things on the ice, and it may not be just Catapult, maybe there's some other things that you find more valuable or less valuable, whatever the case is, but yeah, some of the metrics that you look at on the ice and some of the things that you guys think are valuable to look at and what you're doing with them.
Yeah, Catapult has evolved a lot over the years, and I'm lucky enough to be involved with it after all those changes have happened. So this is my first year and first exposure with Catapult. So if anyone out there is listening to this and I sound like an idiot, that's totally okay with me, because it's just how we're utilizing it right now. But Catapult has made hockey specific metrics that are slightly different to the off-ice metrics that really I know nothing about either. So my gibberish that I'm going to be speaking to you is probably gibberish if you were speaking to me about the stuff that you did. But we look at a couple different things to kind of see where everyone's at from different measures. So we look at on-ice load and player load as our general workload metrics. Player load is all the different accelerations through 5 different bands. And then on ice load just takes out the 2 lowest bands, which tends to be just gliding and really easy skating, and gets a different metric for workload. So we like to look at both of those to see how the actual volume was accumulated. Then we look at high skate load, which takes the 4th and 5th band of acceleration and spits out a different value. And that's how we determine our high intensity workload from an external standpoint. And then with that, we take the polar data that we're getting. We have a cutoff at 85% of max heart rate. And then anything above that, we take as a high intensity heart rate. So we're looking at those 4 things, as well as we look at TRIMP, which is just the total workload of the heart rate system. We look at that divided by our player load as kind of our fitness measurement. Because, if if you do more work with a lower heart rate, your trimp divided by player load is going to be lower. So that means you're getting in better shape.
Sure.
So we kind of look at all of those different things to get general ideas, mainly of what the exact team looks like. But then with our medical staff and with us, we look at it from a player by player standpoint. So we allow the coaching staff to make more general global decisions, and then we make our personalized decisions just within our performance and medical staff.
Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds like Catapult really did a good job of making it, pretty easy for hockey, right? Like, I mean, I would imagine it could get pretty complicated. There's a lot taking place within a shift, but I do think that, for them to be like, hey, listen, we're going to have a total of 5 bands here, and here's how you can kind of, delineate between like what's, high intensity actions versus low intensity actions. It's almost like a different version of a time motion analysis. Obviously it's not close, but it could be in terms of just like, your general qualities.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, they did a really good job. And even there was a gap for a little bit where, goalies were kind of in no man's land, because obviously they don't have a ton of external workload because they stay within a net. So, if you put a catapult unit in them, there was absolutely no player load, and their trimp values might be through the roof just because they get worked like a horse. So it was a little bit of like, how do we handle this? But Catapult's done a really good job of just this past year adding a goalie load, and they can see, goalie load to the right if they're pushing to that side of the net, goalie load to the left, but then they can also see every time they drop down into a butterfly. So we've used all of those different things to kind of quantify different values with the goalies as well, which is extremely new, and we're still tinkering with it. And we're lucky enough to, have 2 young kind of all-star goalies where we didn't have to do much with it this year. But for sure, something we're looking to dive into a little bit more as it keeps evolving.
Yeah. And you said, you kind of, coaches will make their decisions based off of what they see. You guys will make your own decisions. How has that gone? Conversations around that stuff? Is it, pretty cohesive, or you guys kind of, it's still kind of work in progress, or?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I think, just to start off, we had a coaching change this offseason. So how it's going to go this season is going to probably be drastically different from how it's gone in previous years, just because it's a brand new body in there. But we use the assistant coaches as a vessel to the head coach to interpret what we're trying to say into specific hockey terms. I think for us as performance coaches to tell a hockey coach that's been coaching likely for 20 plus years, your practice is too hard, or you should do these drills versus these drills is pretty nearsighted, because they have been feeling out the game and have had a lot of success way before Catapult was involved with the system. So we were just trying to tinker and like I said previously, get out that last 1% of improvement that we can. So we have sat down pretty extensively with some of our assistant coaches and kind of told them how we're utilizing it, both from a practice standpoint, but then, an extra work standpoint for guys that aren't playing or guys wanting to do extra work off the ice. So our assistant coaches will run that extra work on the pregame skates for the guys that aren't playing, and the guys that want to do stuff after. So, if someone's had maybe is more of a conditioning emphasis, and their high intensity heart rate is something that we really want to push, because we know that that's going to hopefully make some cardiac improvements. They might do more like 2-on-2 or 3-on-3 stuff in pregame skates, because it's just a little bit more continuous and the heart rate's going to be up high, versus, someone who might need some more high skate load. They might do, blue line to blue line straight sprinting after practice with full rest, so that they're getting max speed every single time. So they've been really, really helpful with that process. But then also from a team standpoint, saying, here's what we think the team is at based on not only the data, but then what they're saying in their questionnaires, and to us day to day when we're talking to them, here's how we want to tell that to you. And then that coach can take that however he deems the head coach would take it appropriately, and kind of give it to him. And then from the medical side, we are lucky enough to have an analytics department that has mapped out an entire website where we have a in-house AMS system. So we can color code different people based on standard deviations off of their norm, based on certain ranges. It can be based on the previous 7 days, the previous 14, 28, 2 years, whatever we want it to be. Or we can do it to the team, and then we can take those really easy color codes systems, along with our medical staff, who likely don't understand the actual ins and outs of catapults as well, but can understand red means bad, and take those ideas and spit them out to our head coach to kind of say like, hey, we think it's valuable if this guy gets a day off, or if a guy is on the other end of the spectrum, we think it's valuable if this guy gets pushed a little bit more, and that would be more of our conversation with them. So we seem to have a good system so far. I'm really excited to see how it's going to evolve this year with a new head coach. We have two of the same assistant coaches that have worked with us extensively from the extra work standpoint, and one new assistant coach. So it's going to be probably wildly different in some regards and exactly the same in others. So it'll be interesting to see how it pans out.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. This is awesome insight. I really appreciate this. It's well, obviously we're probably over that 45-minute mark. Like I said, I was gonna botch that, but honestly, this is awesome stuff, and this is exactly what I expected it to be, Tim. So this is great. One more question before we kind of wrap up. I guess kind of bringing it back home, like what are some of the best experiences that you've had since being at, the AHL and NHL level? Like what do you feel, if you want to kind of provide a little bit of insight there, what are some of the things that you feel have been most fulfilling for you, whether it be an experience that you've had with a particular athlete or with another coach or support staff, or just something for you internally? What do you think has been the best experience for you so far?
Yeah, I think probably none of it has to do with actual strength and conditioning standpoint. I think being in the minor leagues, you see a lot of guys get called up to the NHL, and most of them come back down, and some of them you never see again because they stay up in the NHL forever. So I think some of the best things that come to mind are guys that maybe my first year in Providence were with me for a majority of the year. They get called up kind of towards the end of the year, and then now I'm in Providence for 2 more years and I never see them again. And then now I get called up to Boston, and, I might have seen them at training camp or the playoffs or whatever when I'm up in Boston a little bit more, but then now I'm with them full time again, and they're, NHL regulars. So I think seeing not only that, but then the maturity changes in some of these kids is really interesting. You get in hockey specifically so many different cultures that other sports I don't think are exposed to. We have Swedish players and Finnish players, we have Czech players, we have Slovakian players, we have Latvian players, we have guys from everywhere, so seeing how, a 19-year-old Czech kid comes into Providence, and then now seeing him as a 23-year-old as an NHL player, that transition as a hockey player obviously is really cool, but then as a person is even better. So seeing those transformations of those people has been dynamite. And I wish I saw more. In my time in Providence, a lot of times guys get sent back down just because the guy that was hurt in the NHL is healthy now, so they don't have a roster spot anymore. That guy comes back down, and sometimes those guys get extremely discouraged, and they don't use that as motivation and fuel to get themselves back up there. But there's been a ton of examples of guys who have used it as fuel and taken the opportunity to better themselves, and now they're NHL regulars, whether it's with the Boston Bruins for some of them or with other teams for a lot of them. So I always like reconnecting with those people, and whether they're here or somewhere else, and seeing their success. So it's been awesome.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's I'm really happy for you. And then like this last question, I want to make sure that you said you just did a presentation, so let the people know, like Instagram, whatever, you got social media and all that kind of stuff. Like let people know where they can find you, and any work that you've done. Obviously, plug it away.
Yeah, I wish I knew exactly what the website was where the presentation is on, but it was through the IHPS, the International Hockey Performance Summit, in SCAF, which is our Strength and Conditioning Association of Professional Hockey. There is I believe it's called prohockey.com or prohockeystrength.com, that if you're not subscribed to and you're interested in hockey strength and conditioning, that is for sure a primetime resources, and a lot of our presentations get put on that. But then also on a kind of monthly and weekly basis, there's people from all over the NHL and AHL that are giving presentations and writing articles. So I have a couple articles on there as well as a couple presentations. But kind of my day to day, I try and post on Instagram a little bit more as a younger person, and same thing on Twitter. I probably don't do a good job of it as some other people, but both of those are just my name, Tim Lebbossiere. There's no underscores, no periods or anything like that. If you need to spell it, I hope Anthony will just put it correctly in the title of this podcast. So it's easy to find,
Yeah, hopefully we'll try to get that. I'm going to double check with you.
Yeah, but hey, if anyone has any questions or anything, my messages are always open. I try and answer everything. Even, I know those hidden messages get tossed away if I don't follow you or something, but I always try and if I see a little red notification there, I try and make sure I get back to everyone. So if there's any questions that spark anyone's interest, I'm always open to talk.
That's awesome. Tim, thanks so much, man. You crushed it. This is great stuff. I hope all the listeners listening, hope you guys enjoyed this one. And we'll catch you again soon, Tim.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one.